Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. There are times in our lives where we just simply feel overwhelmed. There are things going on in our life that just seem too burdensome. They weigh heavy on our hearts, and we feel as though we are drowning in our circumstances. And when we get in those type of situations, I think Psalm 69 that we read today ought to bring at least some perspective to those particular situations. Psalm 69 is both messianic, but also historical in connection to David and some situation that he was dealing with his enemies. And it's pretty clear as you read through the psalm that there are a lot of messianic themes that run through it. I wouldn't say every verse is messianic, but there's enough of them to where it's really hard to distinguish between David's situation and that of the Messiah. And there's a lot of overlap there as you read through it. And this is how he describes the situation at the beginning of the psalm. It says, "Save me, O God, for the waters have threatened my life. I have sunk in deep mire, and there is no foothold. I have come into deep waters, and a flood overflows me. I am weary with my crying, my throat is parched, my eyes fail while I wait for my God. Those who hate me without cause are more than the hairs of my head. Those who would destroy me are powerful, being wrongfully my enemies. What I did not steal, I then have to restore." This whole idea of being immersed in the situation to where the situation was so overwhelming that he uses the analogy of a flood, as though a flood had come in and just totally overtaken him. And we can definitely think of situations where David would have experienced this, whether it was with Saul or with Absalom or with others who rose up against him. But we can also see it with Christ as well, who had many enemies. And that definitely came to light during his crucifixion. But in either case, both of them perhaps could have described their situation as overwhelming. And so when we read Psalm 69, we can kind of relate when we get into those type of situations. And this teaches us that just because we feel overwhelmed doesn't necessarily mean we're not spiritual enough. David was definitely a very spiritual person, and certainly Jesus was a very spiritual person. But this is a part of living here on this earth. Sometimes circumstances, situations do become very difficult and overwhelming at times. And the question is not whether we ever feel overwhelmed, but what we do when we become overwhelmed. How do we respond to these situations when we feel overwhelmed? The psalmist here, and I would say even Christ himself, responded with prayer by entrusting themselves to God. As we read in verse 13, it says, "But as for me, my prayer is to you, O Lord, at an acceptable time. O God, in the greatness of your loving kindness, answer me with your saving truth. Deliver me from the mire, and do not let me sink. May I be delivered from my foes and from the deep waters. May the flood of water not overflow me, nor the depth nor the deep swallow me up, nor the pit shut its mouth on me." And so the psalmist here is expressing this prayer and bringing the situation to the Lord and seeking the Lord's help in the situation. And it might seem a simple thing, an oversimplification to say, yeah, you just need to pray about it. But prayer does definitely help when we feel overwhelmed. And sometimes when we're overwhelmed, those are times that we forget to pray because we're kind of running around trying to fix the problem, or we're scratching our heads trying to figure out how to get through this difficult situation. You just need to pause, breathe, pray, and go to the Lord. When we pray to God, it brings our minds up above the situation. It allows us to draw close to the God who transcends the difficulties that we face, and to help us look at things from the eyes of faith and from the perspective of God. And so prayer can be a great asset to us when we feel overwhelmed. Just take it to the Lord. It sounds very simple, but it's very effective. The psalmist did it. We saw that Jesus Christ did this in the Garden of Gethsemane, and we can do it too. So when we find ourselves in these situations, and maybe there's some watching today who find themselves currently in a situation where they're overwhelmed. Things are just getting too difficult. They don't feel like they can carry the burden any longer. Take it to the Lord. Cast your anxieties on Him, for He cares for you. And connect to God in that very close way through prayer, and bring God into the situation and see how things might turn around. And that would be our encouragement today. So let's take these lessons from Psalm 69 and put them into practice. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.